item.
Okay, item number 7.
We would request it.
Sure. Beautiful. We're all in favor?
Ryan, you don't want to renotice everything, right? So come on up here. Oh, it's a continuation. It's a continuation.
Sorry,
We're good.
we're good.
Let me just make the announcement. You're going to go to March 14th. You want to go to the 28th?
Who's looking out for me back there? Who doesn't want me to overwork?
It was adjourned.
We're having 2 in March. I don't know about April. We can talk about that tomorrow. March? No, we're not talking about that now. It has nothing to do with you. It's the ZBA's business. But no, it's March 27th. Wait, no, I'm going to February. Sorry, wait. Maybe it's I don't know. Hold on.
Coming over? Coming for dinner?
It's March 28th.
Be careful what I wish for.
Isn't that Paso?
Now it's close.
Ryan, do you want to go to March 28th?
Sure.
Okay.
Only if you're gonna be here though.
If we have too many more meetings like this, I don't know.
March 28th is fine.
All right, at the applicant's request, the public hearing on 30-32 Twin Avenue is going to remain open and continue to the meeting of this board here in this room on March 28th, 7 o'clock p.m. No public notices will be sent out other than this announcement, so please make a note of it, and other than what is required by the New York State Open Meetings Law.
Okay.
I move to continuation. I second it.
Okay, all in favor? Say aye. Aye. Okay, we'll now move to item number 8, 235 North Main Street, Stonehenge Plaza.
Right across the street.
Literally.
Please read the application so we know what public hearing.
Yeah, I think we should read it in. That's okay.
Yeah.
This is application for 235 North Main Street, Stonehenge Plaza. Subject property is located on the west side of Route 45, 0 feet south of Stevens Place, west of the village of Spring Valley, and is in a PO and R1 zone. This property is designated in the town of Round Point tax map as section 50.71, lot 1, block 5. The applicant is seeking area variances for a congregation for secondary private school education component for girls aged 14 to 18. There's to be approximately 75 through 100 children on site in a professional office. The requested variances are as follows. For school component, PO zone, minimum lot area 10,000 square feet required, 109,445 feet provided, lot width 100 feet required, 639.5 feet provided, front yard 30 feet required, 70.9 feet required, side yard 15 feet required, 57 feet provided, total side yard 30 feet required, 57 feet provided, rear yard 30 feet required, 48 feet provided. It does not appear to require a height variance, is that correct, Walter?
Just to make it clear, private schools are not allowed in the zone. This is a use variance. The area variances are incidental.
Okay, we didn't get there yet, but I'm asking about the height. It says minimum height,
Well,
maximum height, 35 feet required, and less than 35 feet provided. So,
for a use that's not allowed in the zone, there are no bulk requirements.
so what are you basing these on? PO zone or something?
The PO zone does not allow private schools.
So the bulk requirements that we're citing off, where are they coming from?
Well, that's probably for a zone that does allow private schools.
Okay.
Comparison purposes.
I got you.
But there would be no bulk requirements for a use that's not allowed in the zone.
Understood. But so you've chosen a nearest comparable zoning.
I didn't choose it, somebody did.
Oh, maybe the applicant would at the time will explain. Floor area ratio, but does not look to appear to require a height variance based upon the zoning bulk regulations for the zoning district that was selected. Floor area ratio 0.3 required, 0.26 provided, minimum off-street parking 91 required, 126 provided, use variance and special permit required for private secondary school, office component, 1R zone, minimum lot area 10,000 square feet required, 109,445 provided, lot width 105 feet required, 630 9.5 feet provided, front yard 30 feet required, 70.9 required, side yard 15 feet required, 57 feet provided, total side yard 30 feet required, 57 feet provided, rear yard 30 feet required, 48.8 feet provided, maximum height 35 feet required. Looks like less than 35 feet is provided, so no variance required there. Floor area ratio 0.3 required, 0.26 provided, minimum off-street parking 91 required, 126 provided, use variance and special permit required for private and secondary school. Lori, have all required public notices mandated by state and local law been complied with?
Absolutely, and finally finished.
A motion to open the public hearing would be,
Just before we do that, on the maximum height, 35 feet is not required.
It's
We don't
allowed.
have a height requirement.
Well,
Allowed.
It's allowed.
again, a use that's not allowed in the zone does
no,
not
I
have a
think,
bulk
I think
requirement.
Ms. Cole was chiming and commenting on the grammar, and she's right.
Oh, what-
Maximum
Allowed.
height is what's permitted, is what's allowed, not required.
oh, the wording, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And same thing with floor area ratio, it's maximum allowed.
Permitted, you know, proposed, exactly.
Point well taken.
Okay,
I move to open the public hearing.
is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Okay, public hearing is now open.
Mr. Chairman, how are you? Board members, Kevin Conway for the applicant, 664 Chestnut Ridge Road, Chestnut Ridge, New York. As the board may be aware, or is aware, irrespective of the notice that was read by the deputy village attorney, this historically
Can
goes
you
back.
talk to the mic? I'm having a hard time hearing you. Please.
This historically goes back, this applicant has been a tenant on the site for 15 years. So for the historical record, the applicant moved in as a tenant and has been occupied in this fashion as a private school for students aged 14 to 18, high school students, approximately 75 students on site. The total square foot building space for the office component is it's 16,000 total, 8,500 is utilized by the school. The remaining portion is professional office. The applicant has utilized the premises since 2001 pursuant to a certificate of compliance and use that the prior building inspector, Joe Giacaruso, had provided to the client, which I'm going to provide the board and ask it to be annexed as a exhibit. This indicates, pursuant to the historical record, that the client as a tenant has had the legal ability.
So, you know, he's been talking since he's been giving that paper out, and I didn't hear a word he was saying.
Just speak up, Kevin, and just,
No, he was talking to you all
That's fair.
while
That's
walking,
fair.
distributing the papers.
Fair
So I
request.
missed that,
Okay,
that's all.
Fair
could you
request.
just repeat what you said?
That's fine. This is part of the historical record for the board, that the exhibit that I provided was a prior certificate of compliance and use by the prior building inspector, dated January 12th of 2010. Joe Giacaruso, for the project known as Stonehenge Plaza, conducted as offices and school, the lessee owner of Stonehenge Plaza, located at 225 North Main Street. So this is evidence as to the lawful use by the client when the client occupied the premises back in 2001. However, this was provided in January of 2010 by the previous building inspector. The reason we're here, the current building inspector, in conducting his due diligence and his request to have the applicant make this application, to have a further zoning board determination, not just the prior determination from the former building inspector. We advised and the client advised that we had no objection to doing that. But historically, from the record, there's already a determination from the previous building inspector that would be the law of the case that would control, that signifies and evidences the lawful ability of the client having utilized the premises since 2001, including through 2010 when this was issued. The site is quite large, so when you read off the bulk tables before, irrespective of the use category as a private secondary school, the site is quite large, and on the original site plan application that's been approved, there are no, it meets the office and the building usage itself meets all the bulk requirements. There's no variances that would otherwise be required here for the 8,500 square feet of the total 16,000 that's used. So I'm just going to introduce that as an Exhibit B. That's the existing site plan. So this application, and I also have a letter from the current building inspector, Walter Booker. I'm just going to ask that a copy be made, because this is my only copy. It was dated August of in 2016, advising the client that he wished to have the client make this further application to this board.
I'll just read that into the record. Did you reference the certificate of compliance in the record? I'll do both.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Submitted by the applicant's attorney, Kevin Conway, is appears to be a Village of Spring Valley certificate of compliance and use. It reads, in substance, this is to certify that the premises known as Stonehenge Plaza, conducted as offices and school, and lessee or owner is Stonehenge Plaza LLC, located at 225 North Main Street, Spring Valley, New York. Is that the address of this property?
Actually, 235.
What is 230? If it's 235, then the
All
certificate
right,
is wrong.
and it states that,
It has a block and lot number over there.
yeah, the section block allowed is shown as 50.71-1-3.
Is that the correct one for the site plan?
Is that from 235? Is that the 235?
North dash 1-5.
I'm looking at the agenda.
Hold on, we just
Looking at the agenda, item, it says 50.71, section 50.71, lot 1, block 5. Is that the certificate of compliance?
That's the correct one for this site.
50.71.
Stonehenge, because it's Stonehenge Plaza offices and school, 225. I'm just looking at the letter may not be referenced correctly. Yeah, I don't think the letter's referenced correctly, so, but the,
Okay, so back to certificate of
Yeah,
compliance.
just go with this.
It says lot 3, though.
It also has a different address.
So the certificate of compliance says 225 North Main Street with a section block and lot of 50.71-1-3. And what's on the agenda is 235 North Main Street, section block and lot is 50.71, lot 1, block 5. So,
in any case,
anyway, the
that's
date
what
of
we,
this certificate of compliance is January 12, 2010 for the record.
that's what we pulled from the client file that's maintained in the village.
All right, we'll need some clarification on that.
In any case, the school operates on a daily basis. There's 3 buses that transverse the site in the morning and later again at dismissal. The client, the director of the school, is here to speak as well. If the board requires at a further meeting to have any historical record that we need additional information, but the fact of the matter is that the client has been there since 2001. There was
How long
no,
has the school been in operation?
that's what I'm saying, the school's been in operation since. It's 15 years of operation. And they, excuse me, the public can speak on the,
They won't have it.
yeah. The certificate of compliance was provided in 2010. The client's been there for 15 years as a tenant, operating the school.
But has it been operated legally?
Yes, that's what we're saying. So the current building inspector asked the client to come in to get a formal approval from the board. The client was a tenant at the location. The prior building inspector did not make such a requirement. The prior building inspector actually issued that additional compliance certificate in 2010. So the client would have no reason as a tenant to think that they needed to do anything more until such time as Mr. Booker indicated that he believed, that irrespective of the prior use and the prior authority and permission by the prior building inspector, it was his request that the applicant come to the board to make sure that there was no issues and to have the zoning board make a further determination, which we have no difficulty doing. That's what someone does when you're in a situation where you made a determination. The building inspector, the current building inspector, directed us to be here, so we're here pursuant to that direction.
Okay?
Just have clarification again. That school has been in operation since 2001, is what you said.
The client who's here tonight, who under oath would testify that they've been operating for 15 years at that location.
Okay, the certificate was issued in 2010.
10, right, that's correct. Yes,
Got
that
a
was-
10-year gap here. I'm
Yeah,
just-
that was issued later because there was some, on the bottom of it, and on this certificate it says occupancy, but on the bottom it has reconfiguration of partition walls. So I imagine that's why the building inspector came back in and provided that. But the fact of the matter is that the village was aware, the building inspector was aware, and he granted this where it says conducted as offices and school. So there's no, this is not, where it just says offices, and the building inspector wasn't aware that a school existed on the site. And it's been there, and it's been operating for 15 years. So and it is, as a religious application, as the board's aware, the RLUIPA law, the federal RLUIPA law requires that you have a stepped-up basis, where otherwise, if this was a non-religious application, the client would have the complete burden to show why they're entitled to the relief that they're seeking from the board. But with the religious status, the stepped-up basis, it flips back to the municipality to show why the client would not be entitled to the relief. So if this was a brand-new application and the client were seeking approval, the board, in my opinion, should look at it one way, but they've been there for 15 years, not believing that they were doing anything illegal or improper or flouting the law, quite the opposite. They were there with the blessing and the understanding of the former building inspector. So that being the case, that's part of the historical record. You can't ignore that. And the client is here now because the current building inspector directed them to come here. So the school, the client is doing the appropriate thing, taking the appropriate action based upon what transpired in the prior history. There was no effort on the client's part to sneak in, to move in, to operate without the village's awareness and operate illegally, because clearly that's not the case. And it's a large site, and if you look at the size of the site and the size of the building, there's otherwise not, there's no variance requirements from the bulk tables, not because of the use variance, but because of the site itself. Because the site is so large, it works on a daily basis there, and there haven't been, they haven't increased the size, they haven't increased the usage, the intensity, and the director of the school is here to testify as to any of the operational issues that otherwise might be a concern for the board. So there's certainly,
When you said this is a religious school, there's no reference here in your application. It says a secondary private school.
yeah,
It doesn't say anything about a religious school, so our RLUIPA doesn't fit. It's not stated.
That's
I would
right.
respectfully disagree. It is a religious school, and the client can testify as to the nature of it. It's a religious secondary school, Madam Chair, and the Stonehenge Plaza is the name of the entity that owns the property, and we have the owner's consent, but it is a religious school.
I'm just saying it's not shown.
Okay.
But now that you stated, you said the applicant is going to testify to that.
If required.
Okay. You have
And
your
of
client?
course, yeah, the client's here. And of course, it's the first meeting with this board. We went to the planning board previously and received the referral here explaining what the situation was. And clearly here, if there's any issues that the board has or any questions or concerns, we want to have that. So this is not, always we want to care about what the board's reaction would be, and if there's any questions or concerns or things that we might do to, take away any concerns from the board.
Planning board
Before we
completes
ask-
environmental review, sorry, just
Mhm.
some housekeeping.
Yeah.
Complete the environmental, the secret review? the
I
planning board?
believe so.
Who knows for sure? Walter, do you know, did it go to the planning board and get a neg deck?
Yes, it did. It wouldn't be here if it
Wouldn't be here, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, just for the record, the congregation is, it's the application of congregation, it's YRSH of Muncie. And the original site plan that I provided was provided by Steve Sparacco and Bill Youngblood back from when the original site was approved, back, I want to say around 2001.
Is there anybody from the public, or you want to bring your phone? Let's try try to keep it brief, it's almost 12 o'clock.
Oh, really?
Hello, good night. My name is Winsome Wright. I affirm and do solemnly affirm and attest that my testimony I'm about to give is the truth to the best of my ability and knowledge. I actually live next door to Stonehenge, and I've been living there for close to 30 years. The school has not been there for 15 years. We all live there. The school sneaked into there a few years ago. If you notice on the sign, it still says Department of Labor, and they moved 20 years ago. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Go.
I'm Rose Williams. I do solemnly affirm and attest that the testimony I'm about to give is the truth to the best of my ability and knowledge. I also live behind Stonehenge and have been living there for 29 years. It was the Department of Labor. My brother-in-law, Roger Williams, worked for the Department of Labor, and it was located there. There was no school there. Spring Valley is only 2.1 square miles. We have a yeshiva girls' school located right there on Route 45, right across from St. Joseph's. We have another one where it used to be part of Rockland County Community College, which is another girls'
Main
school,
Street School.
which is right there on Route 45. Route 45 is so congested right now with traffic that to even get off of Sneeden Place, it takes, even if the light changes in the middle of the day, you cannot get off the street. Okay, now you're telling me that there's a school there. If that school is there, it's been hiding very well that it's been there, because you can no longer put any more traffic and have any more children out there as it is right now. With the congestion, it's going to be a negative impact on the area to have more people out there the way it is right now. And I think it's unfair to us that live there to have that occur. And again, it is untrue that there has been a school there for 10 years. For 15 years, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Let me get my phone before I leave here. Oh, it was? Oh, shucks. So, I, Vivian Street, do solemnly affirm or attest that the testimony that I'm about to give is truth to the best of my ability. Just trying to put my phone away. So, I'm very shocked to hear that the school was there all these years, because it really wasn't. As a matter of fact, after the Labor Department left, New York Foundling was there. And then they left. So those of us, and I live on Cross Creek, which is off Sneeden Place. I had, when this, I found out this was on the agenda, I want to tell the zoning board an experience. I had not once, twice, maybe 3 times the summer. As my neighbor just said, you have a girls' school, yeshiva, big building, right adjacent to this area here where we are. I don't know how many students are there. I thought there was a few kids there, but over the summer, there must have been 100 kids. Do you know they stopped traffic for 15 minutes because they had kids crossing the street? I don't know if anybody saw this over the summer. They stopped the traffic for the kids to cross the street. Maybe they were sharing activities over the summer between the schools. I don't know. So it happened one time. I said, oh, that's interesting. I saw those girls looking beautiful in their little outfits. Then when it happened again, 3 buses? I don't think so. I can't get out of Sneeden Place for the multiple buses. It's not twice a day. It's often. I don't know. Days I take off, I see the buses. They're coming out of Stonehenge. They're coming out of Yeshiva across the street. You have my car got hit 3 weeks ago, fooling around with the buses and the students. It's not fair for them. And I don't think a professional building is an appropriate location for a school. And that's what the zoning board should be looking at. And I thought schools were governed by state ed department. Last I knew, there is a difference between a private, parochial, and a religious school. Private. State ed is involved in the education of our students. Some of the schools, as you all know, because it's in the Hasidic community, there have been major issues with schools being put up illegally, not having proper equipment, etc. I'm not saying that about this school, but you all should not just carte blanche, yes everything, because you're sitting here. You ought to really do your homework. This is serious business. It's kids, girls to boot. And really, this is serious. And I'm glad and so happy that your due diligence got us here to talk about Stonehenge. Really made my evening, midnight, as it will be in a little bit. Because this is serious business. Serious business. We can't take anything in this little stretch here from Ewing to Eckerson. Somebody better talk to DOT, Department of Transportation, and somebody should show us a report that you all have done a study. This is ridiculous. You wanted to put it over here. That's right. They wanted to put it over here, right, Winsor? And I'm waiting for that next one over here. Now you want to do it. Are you planning to build? I'm confused. What is this plan? Is it to increase the footprint of the building? Or is it doing something else? I'm really not understanding all of these requested variances. Will there be construction? Can someone just answer that?
We'll get to the answer second.
No, I need to know, because then I can finish my thought and be done, because I can go to bed. I need to know you're doing construction. I'm confused. Is it construction you're doing to expand the footprint? So this is just purely to get a legitimate certificate to operate as a school. Is that what this variance is about? Why do you need a variance? Because it's a professional building? All I know is a school should not be there, and it shouldn't be on Route 45 directly across from an already existing private religious school. That's the reason you can say no. Because it's not a reason not to say yes. Okay, you got one within a quarter mile. I know. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't talk as much as you, but we only get 3 minutes, and you really should give the public an opportunity to speak since we've been here with you till midnight. Thank you.
That's right. Amen.
Most of my talking, 99% of it is I'm reading from correspondence. It's not me speaking, so I apologize if you think it's me.
Somebody go up there and say something.
Okay.
I still have several other agenda items.
Good evening, Roselle White, Sneeden Place. I solemnly do affirm or attest that the testimony I'm about to give is the truth to the best of my ability and knowledge. This is to the board. In 2001, did the zoning board approve a school to be over there? Is there any record that this school came to the zoning board and asked permission to be on that land? If they've been there since 2001 and they were not. I want the board to look through your records Because those certificates, I don't know about those gentlemen, but those certificates do not sound very real to me.
Thank you.
It's right. I'm not going to reaffirm. We just ask that I have to swear again? Okay. I sworn in already. Right. So, Miss Wright, okay, next door neighbor to Stonehenge. We just ask that these buildings actually reflect whatever is in there. Because apparently at some stage, a few years ago, the school was sneaked into that building. There was no school there 15 years ago. And it still says Department of Labor, which moved over 20 years ago. So we want whatever approval is given, because the school is already there, we just want the signage to reflect whatever is there. Because we know there's the lab, there is a home health agency, there is now colonial management, and there is a title search building. So we live next door, so we know who are there. Okay? I said the lab. Okay? So we want the signage to reflect whatever is there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Would you mention saturation? I forgot.
Virginia John Teachers solemnly affirm on test that the testimony I'm about to give is the truth.
Excuse me, just
to
a
the best.
second. That's rude. What?
No, that doesn't work.
Yeah, we have to vote, close it's 12 o'clock, he's right.
What?
We have,
Yes, Mr. Sunshine.
We've been here. We deserve to be
hold on 1 second.
Tell you what
Okay, the law says that once it's 12 o'clock, it's the next date, so we do have to close in, what's the
sunshine law, you have to close.
They have to do that.
Does that mean we'll be first next time?
Heard that before.
We had it in the
As
past.
long as you open the public hearing on the date and time published, if it carries it through to the next day or the day beyond that, that's...
Yes? That's what we used to do.
I never heard that, but go ahead, make a motion to continue the public hearing to now.
Okay?
The next day.
To February 28th.
February 28th. First, you can close.
You gotta close.
I don't, no, I don't, you know what, I never heard of this.
So motion to continue, let's do a motion to
I never heard of this, I've been to many meetings past midnight, and it makes no sense.
Well, you only do a workshop when we're not here. Because there's somebody here that, and you,
Yeah, go, continue, my legal counsel is, you don't need to do this.
Okay? We have legal counsel. We rely upon
So what happens then?
Okay?
They closing out and then we finish whatever the item was.
We have to finish this item as well. Okay, continue.
I, Virginia John, do solemnly affirm that the testimony I'm about to give is the truth to the best of my ability and knowledge. I live at 15 Summit Avenue, Spring Valley. I don't know if you were aware of this same building that we mentioned, I was just speaking of that. Rosa Bennett used to have,
Yes, she was.
Rosa Bennett had an office there in that building. And it was past 2001. Just wanted to mention that, okay?
Thank you.
I went to her office, like, I was there. Well, I was still, that was with labor. That was with labor.
Okay, any other comments?
I, Stephen White, do solemnly affirm or attest that the testimony I'm about to give is the truth to the best of my ability and knowledge. Stephen White, 10 Garden Place. It seems like we're trying to figure out kind of what exactly happened in the order of things. I know that the lawyer for the applicant stated that, the the current resident had never tried to misrepresent themselves. And so I guess that would be important, because he wouldn't say that they never did it if it didn't matter if they had done it. So it seems to be a material question. And so we'd like to know what exactly was the sequence of events. The proper sequence we're learning now would have been for them to get a use variance, which I'm not sure even if the zoning board, I don't think I've ever seen a use variance from the zoning board before. That's use, I think, usually comes, am I wrong? Does that usually come from the village board, I think? You guys do use variance also, I suppose, no, yeah, so they would come to ask for a use variance back when they first came, whenever that was. And then somewhere along the line, it seems that there was a certificate issued by Mr. Giacaruso, but it was issued perhaps for the wrong address. But perhaps, and we don't really know why he came in. Apparently there was some sheetrocking that was being done, so we don't know if he came in because he heard there was sheetrocking that was being done, and then somebody called the building department and they came in to investigate and found out you've been sheetrocking without approval. We don't know if there was an application. So there's a lot of don't knows here. So I think it might be worthwhile for somebody to take some more time and research this before you make a decision, to find out what the history of it really was. And I think that, you know, some people got notified here with like 4 or 5 days notice, however much notice you guys are giving these days. And so there wasn't really time to research it. And I know that there's probably some files in the building department. So I think, you know, it does matter, the history of what happened.
That's right.
So I think that's one thing that probably should be researched before a decision is made, exactly how that happened. And the reason why there would have been a public hearing at the zoning board for use variance is exactly what you're doing here tonight, is that the public would have had a chance to chime in. So by that not happening, if it was supposed to have happened and Mr. Giacaruso didn't do it, then it really was him usurping his authority,
yes.
and not just his authority over anything, but his authority over the public,
yes.
who had a right to be heard. And so, you know, that's a major problem, and perhaps it wasn't the applicant's fault, but certainly was somebody's fault. And we got to figure out how to correct it and move forward. But I don't think that it's time to move forward tonight with the limited information and the late hour. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
All right.
Do it then.
I, Lorraine Salento, do solemnly affirm or attest that the testimony I am about to give is the truth to the best of my ability and knowledge. I'm just here to reiterate what everybody else has
What's
said.
your name and address?
162 Sneedon Place West. Sneedon Place West is very crowded. You have St. Joseph's School during Easter. We have to block off the entrances to our place because everybody parks in there. In the morning, you have public school buses. That's another traffic problem. Now you'll have more school buses, more kids. So it's really tough to get anywhere. It takes me 10 minutes to get to the Palisades Parkway, which is not that far away. So there really is a lot of traffic. Plus, I pass that building every day. It's a professional building. I haven't seen any children. I walk my dog. I have never seen any children around there. So I don't know where they're hiding these kids. I really don't. If there are that many children, where are they? So my biggest issue, and I just reiterate, I don't know the history, that I do not know, but I just know it's getting harder and harder to get anywhere out of Sneedon Place. Whether you go left, whether you go right, and yes, there is a school and I think a synagogue. So why do you need another school? Right there. It's just, I think you need to go to someplace else.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
I, Stephen Rosenstock, do solemnly affirm or attest that the testimony I'm about to give is the truth to the best of my ability and knowledge. I am the administrator of Congregation Y Restoration of Muncie. Stephen Rosenstock, 24 Brockton Road. I I am the administrator of the school in the building. In 2001, shortly after 9/11, I decided to open up with a few other colleagues at the school. I was working in the World Trade Center. I had been fired shortly before September 11th, and it just gave me a lot of different perspectives. And in 2001 is when we decided that we're going to attempt to open up a girls' school. We incorporated in 2001, and by 2002 we were in the building. We've been there since 2002, and if necessary, I can run across the street and find a copy of a lease, but we've been there since 2002. I do believe it was May when we first moved in and started doing whatever construction. Any construction we did, we checked with the building department first. We pulled permits for all construction all the time. We got annual fire inspections. They knew we were there. We weren't hiding from anybody. We've been there many, many years. They know we're there. I'm not a very good hider. I'm doing it right across the street from the town hall, facing the front of the building with the school buses going back and forth. Again, we've been there for many years. At the time, I can't explain why Mr. Jacaruso felt that we did not need to go through the zoning board. I can only assume that even though our educational department meets and exceeds New York City Board of Ed regulations, and we are fully certified, that still so more than 50% of our education, our classes are religious in nature, and there is organized prayer there twice a day for the girls. So maybe he felt therefore that we, is a religious thing, and therefore a congregation with an educational component would suffice. We definitely didn't look to go around anybody. We went to Joe before we signed the lease to make sure we'd be okay with him. And as I said, we've always pulled all necessary paperwork and got annual fire inspections since we've been there. And I think Mr. Booker can attest to that too.
Could you tell us how many students you have?
75 to 100.
No, right now, 91.
91.
Well, where are they? I never
And
see
will
them.
you
I don't see
exceed
anybody.
100?
Excuse me.
Pardon me?
Any closing comments
Well, they
or
do keep-
anybody else?
Now, the other people, the other girls are out. Where are these girls? And why is Miss... Well, why
Anybody?
You don't live there, you don't know what the traffic's like, it's horrendous.
Information with regard to financial, for
Horrendous.
the use variance itself, we can provide that at a further meeting, if that's what the board's inclined. Because clearly here, the fact that many of the neighbors
Build
are
it up
not
by
aware that
you.
there's a school there, tells you that the school's been operating without issues with regard to density, crowding, or traffic-related issues. But they have been there for that length of period of time. There's 3 buses that traverse the site each day in the morning and later. And the fact that the site is so large, that's why it works on the site. So forgetting that it's in the PO zone for the moment, it works because the site is so large. I had a similar application in the town of Orangetown some years back, where a religious entity went into the PO zone, similar size and appreciation of size in an office building. And because of the size of the office building and the parking and the setbacks from the street, the application worked and it wasn't an issue. And it's the same issue here. So the applicant, were the applicant to have to move, would the applicant have to relocate, the ability to find another location, the cost would be prohibited to the congregation. So I have no problem putting that financial information on at a further meeting so the board can understand that it's a hardship at this point in time for the applicant. If the applicant were just coming in and looking to come into this site for the first time, then I believe the public comments would be more meaningful or more appropriate. But this applicant's been there for 15 years, so to have this applicant now have to move to the expense and the ability of the applicant to continue to operate, it might be financially not feasible for the applicant to do that. And the board would have to take that into consideration because there's no information, including from Mr. Booker and from the information from the prior building inspector, this applicant made no attempt to play games, to flout the law, to ignore the law. As a tenant, if you come onto a site and you go and meet with the building inspector, which is as attorneys, we advise clients all the time as a tenant or even as an owner, find out what the zoning is and go down and see the building inspector and advise. And they were advised that they could occupy, take the tenancy, and they've been there for 15 years. So it's not, this is a case where you're not crediting the applicant for doing the wrong thing. You'd be crediting the applicant for doing the right thing, and based on the historical record and the ability of the school not to be able to function if they had to move, which I have no problem putting on at a further meeting, because we'll provide those numbers. But that's really the issue here. And legally speaking, forgetting the emotional component, it is a school, but legally speaking, to deny the applicant, I believe, would be, creating an extreme hardship for the applicant. And clearly here, based on the historical record and law of the case, the court, if it had to review it, I think would clearly agree with the applicant in this case. And this is certainly, I've represented plenty of applicants that find their way at a zoning board for the wrong reasons. That's not the case here, and you really need to take it in that light.
Since it's a use variance, so how about the balancing test?
Well, with regard to the, because of the size of the site, and you'll see it's an enormous site, the setbacks, the parking, for all the normal categories that would apply here. There's no zoning bulk table requirements. There are variance requirements that would apply if you look at it strictly because of the size of the building and the small portion that they're utilizing. So from that side, there's no variances requested. As for the remaining part, just by the virtue of the category, it works on that site. If you're looking at it from strictly more of a planning board type application or more of a planning board analysis, does it work on the site? Does it change the character and nature of the neighborhood? It's been there for 15 years, so clearly it hasn't. From that perspective, I don't think you can argue that this is going to drastically change the neighborhood. It's been there in the neighborhood. It's worked in the neighborhood from the traffic, from all the other factors that a planning board would consider, as well as here, with the additional stepped-up basis, since it is legitimately a religious use, as well as the school portion. I don't believe that the village, even if it wanted to, would have the legal ability now, at this stage, to say, no, we're going to deny the use variance. But I have no problem putting on additional financial information so the board can see that this school can operate if it has to move from the site. This is not a new school. This is not a small school with less than 50 students. Yes, ma'am.
Would you be able to provide us all the New York State issued permits from 2001 and all the fire inspections from fire department from 2001?
Most of that information is in the village files.
Yeah,
So we found.
I think that's an appropriate question for Walter, Laurie. Could you provide, not obviously now, but for the future meeting, copies of all COs and certificates of compliance that have been issued for this property?
Well, for the building itself, that would be...
For the whole entire property, whatever's there. Sorry. We have this certificate of compliance. If there's any other COs?
This is what we located.
Please provide everything and anything you got, all right? Going back as far back, going back as far back as you can, that the records
It
have.
says 2010. So that would be 8 years.
Yep.
You keep saying 15.
The client testified, the director of the school, that he took tenancy, and we'll provide that, we'll provide a lease agreement. Excuse me, can I speak, please? I didn't interrupt anyone who spoke. We'll provide the lease documentation, all the documentation to show that, in fact, they took tenancy back in 2001, and they've been there continuously.
I'm student tenancy, I'm a student in school. It says it's office and school.
Yep.
So which is dated 2010.
All right,
I understand.
If I can focus this more, Kevin,
Yeah, good.
members of the board, whether the school was there since 1998, 2001, 2010, is irrelevant if it wasn't there legally. Because just because you, but don't worry, I've got some good news for you too. It's not bad news, I'm just laying out the law. The fact that someone has been using property, forget the school, anyone's been using property in a manner that is not legal under the zoning regulations or any other illegality, over a length of time does not ever make it legal. The only time that use of property in a manner over a long period of time may make it legal is if that illegal use preceded the zoning code. And that, you all know, is called, what everyone calls colloquially, a grandfathered use.
Right.
Also known more legally as a pre-existing non-conforming use. We're not talking about a pre-existing non-conforming use here, which is also known as a grandfathered use. I don't think Mr. Conway is making an argument to you that this has been a religious use or a school preceding the adoption of the zoning code in the Village of Spring Valley, because that would probably go back to at least the 60s, or at least the 70s. That's not what's being argued here. So therefore, what the question you need to ask the building department, we already did, we want to try to figure out what the legal use has been permitted there historically, and how do we do that? Certificates of occupancy are the Holy Grail, if I may use that religious reference. Certificates of occupancy, number one. There are other documents, certificate of compliance is also an evidentiary support of a type of use that's referenced in the certificate of compliance. Now this one happens to have a different address, a different section, block, and lot, but I know that with the E911 and all that, addresses were changed. This was only 2010, so I don't know. But Walter and Lori is going to assist Walter if needed. Put it all together. We want all COs, we want all certificates of compliance, and anything else that might be indicative of the legal use of this property historically. Okay, so that ends that inquiry for now. We need the documentation. And the financials, we'd also like those. That was mentioned. What else?
Just to add in that, not only the Village of Spring Valley paperwork, we want to see the New York State paperwork issued from permits for anything issued from New York State. Because village could be created, because a lot of people don't trust for whatever reason, but however, we need more from New York State.
What, state ed?
Department of Education or any.
But with the caveat, Mr. Finney, that with the state issues, the state is not necessarily concerned about what our zoning regulations allow. I understand it's helpful to have that information, and please provide that if you could. But just be cautioned that it's the village's documents that determine the legal use of property or buildings, use and occupancy as far as our zoning is concerned, okay? Not the state.
I just want to determine that it was a school actually.
No, I would like to see that as well. I think it's helpful information, but it's not determinative. It's helpful, it has some evidentiary value, but it's not determinative. I just want to point out to everyone here, I'm going to send a legal memo to you members of the ZBA, attorney-client confidential memo. And I'm going to give you a brief, and I've written these several times, about religious uses and your obligations vis-a-vis a use variance application. I will summarize it, very, very gross summary, in the sense that it's a complicated area, as I think everyone in the county is starting to appreciate that religious uses and zoning are not a black and white question, and there are not black and white answers. But one thing I can tell you is that an application proposing a religious use, or just a school that's not a religious school, the same rule applies for schools. And I'm not even talking about our LUPA. This law I'm giving you precedes the adoption of our LUPA. This goes back decades. A land use board, like a zoning board of appeals and a planning board, and a village board for that matter, if they're reviewing special permits, must give greater flexibility. In the controlling cases in the state, use the words special treatment. Doesn't mean that a religious user or a school, even if it's not a religious school, a secular school comes in here and says, we're exempt from zoning, we can do whatever we want. Absolutely not. There are still requirements and obligations, responsibilities of the school applicant. They do have burdens and I'm going to put it all in my memo to you. Not going to do it tonight, obviously. And I implore you to read that memo, to ask me questions, but it's not a standard, typical use variance or area variance review that you're going to be going through. It's going to be more of a balancing. The legitimate governmental concerns and needs of the municipality, the Village of Spring Valley, as weighed against the legitimate and proven needs of the school. That's where the financials will be of some help. It's a balancing. It's not so someone had mentioned the use variance criteria. They don't apply when it's a school application. Now, you layer on top of that RLUPA. That's a whole other layer. I'm not even talking about that yet, but that will be in my memo, okay? And again, I want to make it clear to the applicant, and also the board, and the members of the public. It does not mean that schools, even secular schools, or religious users and religious schools, get whatever they want because they're going to start waving the flag of RLUPA. No, but it is a factor, and it does change the way land use boards must review applications. It's not the standard typical use variance or area variance review. It's different. It's more of a balancing of the needs of the religious user, the legitimate needs, as proven by their testimony and documentation, and the needs of the municipality, traffic impacts, drainage, all of that comes into play, okay? Look for my memo, based upon the complications.
Could you include saturation?
Sorry?
Could you include discussion of saturation and in your memo to the zoning board members?
I'm not sure what you mean, but I will lay out the law in a comprehensive manner that will address all issues relating to school uses and religious uses. I think March 28th might be a little bit tight because, you know, I really would like to educate the board and give them time to digest this. So I think our April 24th meeting, not April 24th. Would you be okay on the second meeting in April? Is that okay? This has been dragging on for a while.
Okay.
Wait, hold on. We may not have a second meeting in April yet. That remains to be determined. So what is the regular, the second Wednesday? I can't open my calendar on my phone because it's recording the public hearing. Anyone have a calendar out the second Wednesday in April?
Is that what you're going to hear the case again?
Yeah, so stick around so I can make the announcement.
Yeah, so I know.
I opened my calendar. Hopefully I didn't stop the recording. It's April 11th. So everyone in attendance interested in the application of Stonehenge Plaza, 239 North Main Street. This is the secondary
April 11th?
school. It will be, the public hearing will remain open and continue to April 11th, 7 o'clock p.m. here in this meeting room. No other public notices will be sent out as required under the New York State Open Meetings Law. So April 11th, 7 o'clock.
Okay,